Broadcasting from the campus of Salisbury University, this is WSDL Ocean City, NPR News Talk 90.7, putting Delmarva first. It's time for Delmarva Today with your host, Don Rush.
President Obama pulls the trigger on immigration reform. Welcome to Delmarva Today. This is Don Rush. Last night, the president announced he would go it alone, issuing an executive order that could affect as many as 5 million undocumented immigrants in the U.S. Parents of U.S. citizens and legal permanent residents will now be able to apply to remain and work in this country. Meanwhile, even before the announcement, Republican leaders in Washington were denouncing the move, calling it unconstitutional and lawless. Take a look at these latest developments. We have on the phone Matthew Peters. He's the director of the Chesapeake Multicultural Research Center in Easton. And take a look at the impact on the undocumented population. And in studio at the moment, we have Salisbury University political science professor Michael Laughlin, who will help us take a look at some of the politics of the president's action. Later on, we hope to have someone from Casa de Maryland as well, talking about how this will play out, particularly in terms of the clinics that will be needed in order to implement this law. First, Matthew, I want to turn to you. And what was your reaction as you watched the president's speech last night?
Well, I really enjoyed hearing it finally spoken on national television. It's been talked about a lot, for quite a while. Obama is saying these things. I think we were already kind of, following the news very closely over the past few days. So we all kind of knew already what to expect from the president's speech last night, and it really came out really well last night. I was really, really happy about it.
Now, you work with the immigrant population, including the undocumented population, and this is obviously a lot of this has been anticipated as we approach this speech. What has been the feeling in the community?
Well, I mean, it kind of came, very sudden. So it only came the news, I think, about it on Tuesday that it was going to be televised. But right away, almost every community member I spoke about, they knew about it. They knew it was coming, and I'm sure they were all up last night watching it. I got a lot of texts last night on my phone saying, what can we do to help? A lot of community members want to start helping with this new process.
I want to turn to Michael Laughlin here. And what was your reaction when you saw the president make this announcement? We sort of anticipated he was going to be doing something. Was it more than you expected, less than you expected? What was your overall political sense?
I think in terms of the larger politics, Obama went bigger than I think a lot of people expected him to do. I mean, I think there was, again, he has been a president who has been an accommodationist president, that is, seeking out compromises and being rebuffed again and again. And but at this point, there was great pressure, political pressure, I think, on him to take some significant action. The planning process of this, of course, has gone back months. I mean, the work, the background legal work and analysis of what would lay into his presidential discretion in the executive order was explored thoroughly, I think, months ago. And the question really was then what the timing was going to be. Was it going to be prior to the election? Or post-election. Post-election in the lame duck session or later on in the spring. And I think it was really a political judgment then to say, let's do it now.
Now, Peter, nobody's really going to get, say, for instance, a work permit until, I guess, about 6 months in. How do you see this law working, and how do you see the community getting a hold of this information and applying?
Is that to me?
Yes.
Well, I mean, I'm assuming here in Maryland, we kind of already had a head start. This past January, the new Maryland driver's law took effect, and lots of undocumented were eligible to start applying to get a driver's license. It was a big rush, and it's been going on ever since. People have been just getting more and more educated about it. So I'm anticipating it's going to be very much the same thing. We need to be able to get out there, make sure we're getting them the correct information. They're very susceptible to people that work in the shadows and people that are going to try and take advantage of them and take advantage of their money because they're so excited that this is finally an opportunity. We need to make sure, and we're going to start today. We already have flyers out with exactly what the president said. How to prepare for it. We're going to start doing clinics, either daily or weekly now, making sure that the correct information is getting out there. And we expect the same, great social results that we've seen from the driver's license laws. The people, getting all their paperwork in order, their tax work in order. This one includes, I know, a criminal background check, which, there's plenty of facilities here that we can get them to complete that. So I kind of expect it to be the same type of process that we've seen over the past 10 months with the driver's license law.
Now, one of the things that struck me was that this affects, let's estimate about 5 million people, and one of the qualifications is that these are parents of U.S. citizens or legal permanent residents. So if you are undocumented and you are in this country but you don't have any children here, for example, it kind of leaves you out. Does that, do you think, going to split some of these families where, let's say one brother may have, say, children here who are legal or who may have permanent residence, he may stay, but yet another one who doesn't have any family ties in terms of children and so on will be out in the cold.
So exactly, when I look at my client base, it kind of really goes along the lines of what I've heard in the national news. It might only affect probably 40% of the clients I have. It's going to be difficult. I mean, it was much more last night. It was the 5 years, and that was much more. It's going to include a lot more people than I thought. But a lot of these family members, a lot of these people, are going to be excluded. And I think also all the agricultural workers, all the men that have been working here, providing for their families, they're going to be left out. And even the parents of the DACA recipients over the past couple of years, they're also going to be left out of this executive order.
By the way, were you surprised at that? I mean, I didn't hear anything at all, and I haven't seen anything in the news about any kind of expansion of DACA at all. I mean, I'd anticipate there might be something going on there, but I haven't seen. Have you seen anything or
about the expansion?
Yeah, of DACA. Yeah, in terms of like the age, the amount of age that you might qualify.
Yeah, I didn't hear about the expansion of that or any changes to that in the speech last night. And I guess some people were expecting maybe some addition to that, but I didn't detect anything in all the websites from the president today. I haven't seen anything stating that.
Michael, how in terms of the Hispanic community, and how do you see them reacting politically to this? Because as we just mentioned a moment ago, it goes only so far. It's certainly temporary. We all know that as well. But that you could find families that are kind of on the divide, on opposite sides of this divide in terms of who stays and who goes.
I think that the main consequence, I think, is going to be applause for what Obama has done within the Hispanic community. After all, they have been lobbying for this for a long time, and this is a victory. It's a victory, clearly a victory for them politically, and in terms of public policy. However, it's clearly only a half measure because there are approximately 11 to 12 million undocumented workers in the United States, and this addresses maximum 5, right? And again, through the process, it's not really going to come out to be 5. It'll be less than that. So the Hispanic community has more work to do, but it has a victory that can give them motivation to push even further, so that the problems that you've identified here with family members that are going to be left out, that requires a larger reform. I mean, immigration reform, a comprehensive reform, clearly remains necessary. Who will deliver that? And what's interesting, I find, is that you have some Democrats saying, this could be rescinded if you get the wrong president in 2016, which is a hint at saying, which president would you want? Did you want a Democrat or a Republican? And here's where the politics is so laden with great measure, and that is that Obama has struck, and the Democrats have struck for the Hispanic community, and the Republicans are left with they're on the opposite side. So the pressure, the politics is the dynamic here is, okay, Obama is saying, if you don't like what I've done, give me a bill, right? And the Republicans now are left in the position of, if they don't provide a bill, right, and within the next 2 years, that the politics lines up for the Democrats to go forward. If they do provide a bill, right, and try to take at least some credit, it's still going to be Obama who would be signing a bill, assuming that the bill would actually be something that Obama could sign, and then the president gets credit. So the politics the dynamic here, I think, is bad for the Republicans, particularly in terms of their ability to appeal to the Hispanic voting bloc, which is going to become bigger, not smaller.
Peter, I want to touch on something that Michael said, which is the temporary nature of this. That is to say that if there's a new president, they could very well rescind this particular set of measures, as indeed they could, say, rescind DACA, the temporary measures for kids who were brought here by their parents. How does a community like that deal with that kind of uncertainty?
Well, I think it's easy. I mean, they're dealing with daily uncertainty now anyway. I mean, the reason coming up is because of the high amount of uncertainty in their lives. So I think, one of the things that, President Obama said last night was, focusing on the hopes, not the fears. And that's what this community is going to do. I mean, they're going to focus on this hope and the change that comes with it. Focusing on the fear is something they're more than used to and have, unfortunately, become very adept to. And we need to work, to focus on those hopes, because, like I said, what we've seen when they follow that, I've seen this vast changes in the family structure and their social engagement just because of the driver's license. Now with this, we're going to see families much more engaged, much more participating in events and activities. Their children much more visible in community groups and sports groups. So we're going to focus on that hope. And, hopefully we get the information out that they understand that this is just a temporary fix. But, I mean, I don't think they're going to be preparing for the worst. They're always going to be preparing for the best.
By the way, how do children deal with the fact that they may be either legal or they may be, for instance, U.S. citizens because they were born here, but their parents are not? I've seen a number of stories, particularly in the news, where there are children who've now grown up and they either fear that their parent is going to be taken away, or in some cases their parents were taken away as they grew up. How does that work for particularly for these children and certainly the parents? I mean, what kind of tension does that create in terms of how they live day to day?
Oh, it's an incredible amount of tension. I mean, just this past month, I've had 2 families where the father has been taken away that we work with, of young children in elementary school. Unfortunately, we have to say, yes, children are resilient, and we can see that, and they are. We shouldn't have to put them through this. But the family structure gets stressed out. It's the father is used typically the one that provides most of the income for the family. So taking that out places a lot of stresses on the community. Luckily, here on the Eastern Shore, we have small, tight-knit communities, and a lot of these members, all these undocumented are involved in church groups. So there are a lot of support that they can give these families in the meantime until there's that family structure finds a way to get balanced again. But unfortunately, I do have to deal with the aftermath of this, and the school has to deal with it, and the community eventually has to deal with the aftermath of these families living in fear every day, and then the reality of the fear is warranted because some of the parents do get picked up and taken away.
Let me just break in. So what is then the reaction of, say, for instance, a child, and you've indicated this just recently, what has been the reaction of a child who sees their parents leave?
I mean, what I see when they come back to school, I mean, it's, again, I see them, they're pretty resilient. They kind of say it like just kind of it's a way of life. I don't think they feel like they're alone in this. I think they know that there's a number of families and a number of classmates that have the same fears, and a lot of them maybe have had the same experience. But the children are able to pick up and just keep moving forward. And then even the mother, but we'll pick up, take that extra job, and keep trudging forward. So the community is incredibly resilient, even though it's we test them. They're incredibly resilient to this. But that's what I see on the outside, the exterior, when they're in school. How they behave at home, I don't have the information on that, and I can only imagine that it is very difficult and very stressful.
Michael?
Here's where I think what Obama has done is it's the confluence of good policy and good politics. The policy that he's pushing for right at this point is going to address that issue, the family problem, and the idea that Republicans would, if they had the opportunity, overturn that is highly unlikely. Because policy, a lot of Republicans are going to actually agree with some of the merits of this policy, even though they can't say this publicly. To challenge that, to overturn that, would be to further alienate the Hispanic population, the Hispanic American, the Latino American population, which again, the politics is moving in a direction of a majority-minority America. And Republicans, if they wish to be in the game, in the political game in the future, must appeal to Latino Americans. So I think that this, though it remains a temporary measure, it is hard to see politically whether Republicans would really challenge the content of this policy move.
We've been, by the way, speaking with Matthew Peters. He's with the Chesapeake Multicultural Center and in Easton, and we appreciate you joining the show.
Thank you.
Mike, I want to turn to you because a lot of it has been now talked about in terms of the legality and how big this really is in terms of the legal issues. And there was an interesting distinction actually brought up last night on cable television, as opposed to necessarily being outside the law as opposed to being outside the norm. That is, that something could be legal, but still unlike, for instance, the things that have come in terms of the past. How do you see this fitting into the presidential prerogatives, such as executive orders, what President Reagan did and the former President Bush did, and how does this fit into that historical scheme?
I think in terms of the legality of it, I think it's going to be clearly legal. It's implicit in what they call the prosecutorial judgment or prosecutorial discretion. The enforcement of any law, there's always going to be discretion about how far you can and are able, with the resources that you have, to enforce law. Again, there are 11 million undocumented workers. No one, even there may be some of the far-right conservatives in the Republican Party who believe that you could actually deport 11 million people. But most reasonable people on both sides of the political aisle, partisan aisle, say you can't do that. So you have to pick and choose. So here, what Obama has done is to say, we can't just pursue it in a chaotic way. We're going to be more focused now on how which parts of that population we will deport and which we will not, because as some people have said, police officers don't prosecute everybody that goes over 55. They choose, and they only have so many resources to choose. So I think within that scheme of things, this is a fairly normal kind of and routine measure. On the other hand, there is a further, I think here's where at least the politics will be judgment. Obama clearly recognizes this as opening of the door, putting in place a piece of comprehensive reform. In other words, I think what he's done here is really a more positive step. So it's not simply, I only have many resources, so we can only direct in one direction or another. There really is a substantive policy choice that he's been making here. So I think in that sense, the Republicans can say, this should be part of comprehensive reform. But can it be challenged? It strikes me, they may try to challenge it, but I suspect that they'll fail in that effort, really.
We're joined now by George Escobar. He is the Director of Health and Human Services at Casa de Maryland and is also Administrative Relief Program here on the Eastern Shore as well, including the clinics. George, let me ask you this. So what was your reaction when you watched the President last night issue his executive orders, announce that he was going to do so? Optimism? Did he go far enough? What was your own impression?
Well, really interesting. Here at PAC in Maryland, we hosted several watching parties for the announcement last night. We had several hundred people here at our headquarters in Langley Park, and we had a couple of viewing parties in Virginia and in front of the White House as well. And the reaction was unanimous from everybody attending. It was overwhelming. It was very emotional. People have been fighting for this for a very, very long time. And really, to many, their calls have been in vain. Despite the fact that, the Latino community and the Latino vote had a huge impact in electing this president. It took him, a little over 6 years to come through on some of his promises. But we do realize that he was working with Congress, and he stayed consistent with his message, preferring to go through the legislative process to get this done. And working very effectively with the Senate to create a bipartisan bill that really had the votes even in the House if it was ever taken to vote. So it's unfortunate. We had a significant delay on the part of the Republican side in Congress to even refuse to bring this to a vote, and really forced his hand. And we see this as him coming through with the commitments and the promises he made to the significant part of the electorate that put him in the White House. We're very happy, we're very excited, and very optimistic about the future. But also at the same time, we have to be cognizant that this isn't the comprehensive bill that we were hoping for. Obviously, this doesn't include. This excludes a large part of our community. Ultimately, this is nothing more than how he explained even last night. This is deferred deportation. So this is an opportunity for people to come out of the shadows and people to really integrate into the community and not be ashamed of who they are, not be ashamed of what their last names are, not be ashamed of what country they were born in. And freely walk our streets and contribute to the society. It's a step in the right direction, but we still have a lot more work to do. Again, this is going to be deferred deportation for a couple of years at a time. People will have to pay a significant amount of penalties and taxes. Not everybody will be included. They will not be eligible for any benefits, and we know this is kind of ironic since we're working on simultaneously we're working on the second rollout of the Affordable Care Act, knowing that a huge part of our community will be completely ineligible for this, whether they're beneficiaries of administrative relief or not. They will not even be afforded the opportunity to purchase health insurance at the full cost. So obviously there's still many issues to work on, both at the local and the federal level, to find long-term comprehensive solutions. And the fight isn't over, but it's a huge, huge step, and people are embracing it. People are very relieved, very happy, and very emotional about this victory.
Let me ask you that along those lines, in particular in those parties, what did people say when they finally heard those words come from the president? What was the look on their face? What was the emotional response when they heard the president make his announcement? I'll
kind of paraphrase some of the comments that people were making last night, but honestly, there was a lot of people were just completely overwhelmed and at a loss of words, really. We had press here last night as well, and people were asking those specific questions, right? And we had a number of people that just could not put into words what it really felt like over the long years of struggling and fighting and trying to make a better life for themselves. Many of them coming from very significantly, dangerous areas, significantly impoverished areas, trying to make a better life for their families, and really just coming here to work and find a better life. They've never received a dime from the government. Instead, they've been consistently paying their own paying taxes. We here ourselves have done an enormous amount of work helping people apply for individual tax ID numbers that would allow them the opportunity to pay their taxes. and we have people with records of over 10, 15 years of paying their taxes using that identification number. Many people aren't aware that there's a large part of this community is paying their taxes through that process. They don't have a Social Security number, but they're still eligible to apply for this ITIN number, which gives them the opportunity to pay for their taxes. So these are hardworking members of our community that have been struggling and fighting for this for so long. And just to finally see the president in the White House address the nation the way he did was really overwhelming, and people were really, really even at a loss of words. After a while, when it sunk in, obviously people began to chant and converting our kind of war cry that we've had for a long time of yes we can, or si se puede in Spanish, to si se pudo, which means yes we could, yes we did. So it was really emotional and a highlight of my career at Cousin Maryland.
Michael, I want to turn to you for a moment, because one of the things that struck me is that there was a Wall Street Journal NBC News poll which basically said that 38% of those polled supported the president's executive actions. But at the same time, the poll found that 48% said that they opposed the president's actions. Now, which also mentioned that other public opinion polls, when talking about comprehensive immigration reform, there is an overwhelming support for that. How do you read the sentiment in the nation in terms of what the president has done?
I think the objection to process will be a wash. I mean, this is a short-term hiccup, I think, politically, because the policy change is politically quite dramatic, and as we've just been listening, quite emotionally powerful within the Hispanic community. This policy change is largely really supported by the American public, and I would just, I think it's possible that this could be a watershed moment. I mean, when we think about what FDR meant to the New Deal coalition, what Lyndon Johnson did with the 1964, 1965 acts, which were Civil Rights Act in 64 and Voting Rights Act in 65, galvanized, mobilized the African American community in the Democratic camp. And while this measure perhaps is not quite as dramatic as those, but in terms of what we've been listening, in terms of how the Hispanic community is reacting, it has the potential of really being that catalytic moment where much of the Hispanic community gets solidly entrenched in the Democratic Party, become partisan Democrats. And I think that's clearly, that's what the hope is for the people who've been pressuring Obama for the Democratic Party moving forward. But what we're hearing in this interview today really is perhaps, partly the evidence that could be moving forward. So I think the question of whether Obama had the authority to do this and was legal, these will be small peanuts in this larger picture.
George, what about that? Is the president, in terms of his image in the community, is he going to be, do you think, looked upon in similar veins as what Michael suggests? Obviously, it does not go as far as the civil rights law, for example, but nonetheless, that he may be a symbol or an icon in Hispanic history here.
I think absolutely, and I think again, as I mentioned earlier, we believe this is the first step in a larger process, right? And who knows who will be in the White House in 2 years? But honestly, this is, as was described, a watershed moment. There's no doubt, and that's how it's being seen. This is a vital, crucial first step in a long struggle for civil rights in the Latino and Hispanic community. So, as I said, the Latino community had a big say in the 2008 election, 2012 that reelected him. Again, really based on the hope and the expectation that he would get us going in the right direction, that he would move on immigration reform. There was a tremendous anger when he originally had voiced his opinion about possibly putting forth this announcement in the summer of this year. As you might recall, there was some violent outrage against him. that came out from some of his biggest supporters in the Latino community about not moving quickly enough on this. But ultimately, as his feet were placed in the fire, he responded. And the community is very grateful for what he has done. And obviously, you'll be seeing rallies at the White House today. You'll be seeing rallies across the country today as he expands on his announcement in Las Vegas that are going to be just an outpouring of support and thank you from the community for the president's action.
Let me ask you this. Do you think that we all know about the temporary nature of this, as we alluded to? Come the next president, they may decide they don't want to do that, and certainly the same thing could be said with DACA and the young children. But do you think that this decision puts in place something that's going to be very difficult for political leaders, even if they're, say, the Republican is in the White House who may not like what the president has done? Do you think that this is reversible at all, or do you think that this is a step that just will not be rolled back?
Oh no, there's no question that there's no sense of permanence in this type of program, right? And that's what is worrying about this. That's what obviously makes it an incomplete, if you want to call it, first step, right? But there's precedent already. Back in the 80s when we were seeing the surge in Central Americans coming to this country as a result of a lot of the Central American wars that were, partly that were largely attributed to some of the to U.S. Intervention in Central America. We saw the government respond through creating the Temporary Protective Status Immigration Classification, TPS, which many Salvadorans, people from Honduras, people from Guatemala were eligible to apply for. These were people that were directly affected from the violence that was plaguing their communities back in those wars. In this new immigration classification gave them basically something very similar to what we're seeing today with DACA, and something we're going to be seeing with this administrative relief measure, in people being allowed temporary status to reside in the United States. So it's basically a 2-year work authorization permit. Now, some of them, many of the TPS applicants, are today eligible for some public benefits. Not all of them, but some of them, a good significant chunk of them. But it was a program essentially very much similar to what we're going to see today. And that was implemented some 20, 30 years ago and has been reauthorized every time it's come up to vote. Again, it's not a permanent program. There's no step towards, there's no pathway to citizenship through TPS. But it has remained supported both by every president that has come after the Reagan-Bush administration through to today, as well as every congressional session that has come through today. So, once these actions are placed, once these actions move, they're very, very difficult to reverse. But they continue to be temporary, and there continues to be many barriers that people have to overcome to qualify. And they have strict requirements in terms of when somebody enters the country, when somebody exits. So, the probability of this opening up additional applicants beyond what is contemplated today is not likely. But the fact of the probability of it being reversing in the future is not impossible, but it would be difficult politically to accomplish.
I want to turn to you finally, Michael. How does this play in terms of the Republican Party? There seems to be some division within the Republican Party. Somebody made the observation that immigration is one of those issues that doesn't unite the Republican Party, it divides it. How do you see this playing out politically for them? Because you can already see the struggle where some, I think it was Michael Steele, the former chair of the Republican Party, at one point said these guys need to get a grip. Lindsey Graham has talked about how they need to move forward. How do you see this playing out politically?
Well, it's clearly there's a division within the Republican Party. There are those in the leadership, the establishment Republicans, Orrin Hatch, Mitch McConnell, even John Boehner, who see the handwriting on the wall politically that they have to appeal more strongly to the Hispanic community to survive as a national party. On the other hand, there is the Tea Party rump part of the Congress that is adamantly against significant immigration reform and do not see the politics in the same fashion. And so what's fascinating here is I think the Republicans are placed in a very difficult position, because if they do nothing, if indeed immigration, this first step, is not followed with a comprehensive reform bill, which has been worked out. I mean, there are various elements of it that have been worked out within the next 2 years, then that lines it up for a strong Democratic push that says, well, these Republicans simply will not push for further immigration reform, and therefore the appeal to the Hispanic community is that much stronger. So that, on the other hand, the possibility, which is, I think it's at least possible. I don't see it likely, but if the Republican establishment could in fact try to do something with immigration reform, then they place themselves in a better kind of position competitively in coming 2016. But again, part of the problem they face now is that Obama has struck first, and would additionally be able to claim credit for comprehensive reform if the Republicans would give him a bill that he could sign. It would be the Obama bill. So in one sense, they're damned if they do and damned if they don't.
We've been speaking with Michael Laughlin. He's a political science professor at Salisbury University. Also on the line with us has been George Escobar. He is the Director of Health and Human Services for Casa de Maryland. We appreciate you joining us. And earlier we had Matthew Peters, who was with the Chesapeake Multicultural Center in Easton. And we appreciate all of those folks joining us for this interesting discussion. This has been Delmarva Today. I'm Don Rush, and thanks for listening.
This has been Delmarva Today, a production of Delmarva Public Radio. Chris Rank produces and is our audio engineer. Don Rush is your host. For podcasts, visit our website, delmarvapublicradio.net, or subscribe to the Delmarva Today podcast in iTunes. Delmarva Today can now be seen on PAC 14. To view the schedule, visit the Daily Times or visit pac14.org.